When you start programming and begin to do some research on the topic, you may start wondering if there's a perfect operating system for software development. If you look into it, you'll find that many people would say it could be any Linux distribution. But why is this the case? Honestly, while I was getting into Linux, I also asked myself the same question. It wasn't like I saw any clear advantages, but now that I've researched a bit more, I can share a few reasons with you. So let's take a look. Number 1. Security. Linux is much more secure than Windows, but there's a logical explanation for this. The most popular operating system today, by far, is Windows. To be exact, it has an 87% market share, while Linux holds just 2.48%, and this is where the issue lies. Generally, viruses made for Windows don't work on Linux and vice versa. So, cybercriminals know that the chances of infecting a computer running Windows are much higher. The thing is, if that virus had reached a Linux computer, it probably wouldn't have worked. Moreover, as a rule of thumb, Linux users tend to be more advanced and don't download just anything from the internet, simply because they often don't need to, which brings us to the next point: it's open source. This means that most programs are free and therefore free of viruses, since the code is visible to everyone. You also don't have to scour the internet for activations and cracks, which we all know are the programs that usually bring viruses to computers. So, since programs are open source, you can tinker with almost all their elements, from the graphical interface to the system's core. You have almost absolute freedom to modify all the options, and you don't have to worry about any legal issues since the programs are made for everyone to use and modify as they please. In fact, you usually don't even need to accept any end-user license agreements or anything like that. Number 3. Usability. If you've never had to build a computer from scratch, it's likely that you've never had to install an operating system by yourself, and this is another strong point of Linux. You don't need to be an advanced user to install and use Linux without too much difficulty, unless you're trying to install Arch Linux, which is a whole different world. So, if you're a basic user, I don't recommend going there. The point is, the installation process for Linux is very similar to installing any ordinary program on Windows. Another advantage is that you can also keep any existing operating system like Windows by using a dual boot. Number 4. Better support for programming languages. It doesn't matter what language you're writing in, because Linux supports all of them. While you might run into some issues from time to time, in most cases, you shouldn't have any major problems. Although it's never a bad idea to do some research beforehand to make sure. And also, thanks to Linux's vast community, if you run into support issues, you can always ask in forums or look for the necessary packages within the repositories of the distribution you're using. Number 5. Programs. Linux has a ton of compatible applications that are quite useful for many programmers because, even though you can write your code using a simple text editor, like Notepad on Windows, Linux has a lot of very useful text editors that can save you time and make your life easier. Also, the good thing is that many of those programs come pre-installed by default, so you don't have to rack your brain over which ones to use. You can just try them out and use the one you like the most. For example, Linux distributions usually come with editors like Nano, Vim, and Atom. Number 6. Job opportunities. There are a lot of people who just use Linux because they like the system, but the truth is that most companies will require you to understand and handle the Linux environment, at least on a basic level. This is where learning to use Linux can really improve your chances of finding a job in the market. Experience with Linux is an almost indispensable skill for many well-paid positions, whether your potential job requires you to manage a company's server or develop their cloud-based services. Potential employers are calling out for people who know the ins and outs of Linux. Even if you don't intend to become a Linux expert, having some fundamental knowledge will give you a competitive advantage as a programmer. So, as you can see, it's never a bad idea to learn Linux, even at a basic level. Just learn the basic commands. And of course, we arrive at this question: is Linux necessary for programmers? Well, as I said before, I don't think necessary would be the right word. But it's clear that it's highly recommended, since you'll have an advantage over people applying for the same job who don't have those skills. And many times, when developing a program, it never hurts to have knowledge of Linux. And as you can see, if you're a programmer, you have some very useful tools that will help you quite a bit. So, in my opinion, it's never a bad idea to learn how to use Linux, even if it's just a little, and the more you know the better. And that's basically it. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please give it a like, subscribe, and goodbye.